You know those forms we have to fill out once a year that we have to say where we did our study leave? Well, I always feel rather guilty when I fill that out because I say that in November I went to the Overseas Ministry Study Center to listen to Dr. Andrew Walls, a guy that kind of started in patristics, and now what he does is he tells stories about Western missionary history. And people have asked me, why as a pastor would you go gather with missionaries and non-Western Christians to listen to a Scottish guy talk about missionary history? How on earth does that help you as a pastor in Los Angeles? Being a minister in a community like Silver Lake has its particular challenges. Silver Lake is made up as a community of networks of people that have formed their relationships with each other without the Bible, without the creeds, without the church. In a lot of cases, they've developed their relationships in opposition to those things. I'm called to be a pastor to Silver Lake Community Church and to the community of Silver Lake. And the question is, how on earth do I pastor the people in this church, but even more the people in the community, when I am a symbol, a representative of an institution and a way of life that many of them have chosen to reject? A lot of churches may not be in the Silver Lake situation, but we all have a similar kind of dilemma. How are we going to relate to this community in which we find ourselves in the 21st century? Well, really, the Western Christian tradition has given us two options. One option is to take the conservative side. The conservative approach, broadly speaking, to the community is that we extract people from the community and from those networks of relationships that were not built around the Scriptures, and we draw them into our church so that they'll build community in our church rather than community in the networks out in the community. In other words, we exist as kind of an alternate community to the networks and systems that form the community around us. The problem with this is that we never actually have an impact in the community beyond the individuals that we manage to pull out of the community. The structures and networks going on in the community around us continue on while we form our alternate community. And really, the people that are still in the community that have not come into our church come to understand Christianity as, oh, that's that thing that happened to my friend that made him kind of weird and made him kind of leave relationship with me. Now, there is another possibility that we have that we've been given by the Western Christendom tradition, and that is that we take the more liberal approach, as some people would call it. The liberal approach means that, again, broadly speaking, means that we smooth out any of those areas where there's conflict between Christianity and between the networks of relationships in our community, so that we can be a part of the networks, part of those networks in our community and be there with them. There's no conflict between what we say as Christians and our community. All we have to say is, hey, we affirm you as you are and we want to be a part of your group. Now that helps us get more involved in the community, but the problem is at that point, in accepting all of the assumptions of the networks in our community, we don't really have a gospel to share anymore. We don't really have a reason to exist beyond promoting their ideological agenda, and once that ideological agenda gains power, then the church doesn't really matter anymore because there, frankly, are a lot better ways to spread that ideology than through the church. At Silver Lake, neither one of those options are helpful if we want to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ to the community around us. So, all of that to say, that's why I go and listen to this little Scottish missionary. Because what he's been telling me, and telling me these stories of mission history, is that there's actually a third option that Western Christendom has come up with in how to relate to community. And that third option is to enter into a community where the community itself sets the agenda, and all you do in coming in is you come into that community to proclaim the gospel of Christ. You're in the minority, you don't have power, you're not the one who's going to change things. Instead, you say, I'm simply here to proclaim the gospel, to be a witness to Christ in the community, and my goal is to turn those networks of relationships toward Christ. Not to take people out of the relationships, not to say, oh, those relationships are fine the way they are, but to turn those relationships toward Christ. And guess who gets to be in charge of how that happens? Not me, but the people in the community that are involved in those networks and those relationships. It's wonderfully freeing as a pastor in Silver Lake to know that my job is simply to love and serve people and proclaim Christ and watch and see as God leads me by the Holy Spirit and leads the people of Silver Lake Community Church to influence the networks and relationships in the community so that they turn more and more toward Christ. We don't know where it's going to lead, only God does. But that's how I've stayed in Silver Lake for 11 years now and continued in the ministry for 11 years now. Because I'm starting to see more and more that the fun ministry is being out in the community and being in situations where I'm not in control.